is February 5th, 2025. And if you've been watching the news cycle this week and wondering why in the world Trump is kicking off trade wars with China, Canada, and Mexico, the top three countries that are the top US trading partners, and account for over 40% of imports coming into the US, well, then you're not alone. And I know that there's been some back and forth, right? It seems like the news is different every day. Trump has already said that he's postponing the 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico after he made a deal with the governments from each country. But it does put us in a situation of wondering what is going to happen tomorrow? What does this mean for our businesses here in the US? And of course, for the US consumers, because more tariffs means more taxes, more money spent by the businesses on the imports coming into this country. And guess what? Those taxes are then passed on to the consumer. So Trump, who ran on the promise that he was going to, bring down inflation, make sure that we had more affordable prices at the grocery store and that gas prices were lower and all that good stuff that the American people love to hear when they're going to vote for someone. Well, they're now in a position of going, wait a second, we're looking at what Trump himself is describing as some pain that we are going to have to deal with in the short term. But that's not what the American people voted for. That's not what they were looking for. And the exact same goes when it comes to some of Trump's foreign policy related statements, such as claiming that the US is just going to take over the Gaza Strip. Well, how are you going to carry that out? And who is going to pay for it? Those are some major questions that we got into with a special guest earlier. So let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Professor Richard Wolff, an American economist, founder of Democracy at Work, host of Economic Update, and author of Understanding Capitalism, which I actually have a copy of right here, and I will leave a link in the description box below. And the timing for this book could not be more perfect now that we have the return of Donald Trump, I will say. Professor Wolff, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Well, thank you, Rachel, for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
Now, I want to get your take on the latest. We are on week 3 of Trump's second term. It has been a whirlwind all around, and he's already starting trade wars left and right. He's announced new tariffs targeting the top 3 U.S. trading partners, which make up more than 40% of American imports. That's a 10% tariff on imports from China and 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico. Now, Trump has since postponed the measures on Canada and Mexico for 30 days after the two countries said that they would strengthen their border security. So, what should we know about tariffs in general, and why is Trump so obsessed with them, even though I thought we learned during his last term that tariffs are a tax put on the business that usually is transferred down to the consumer?
Well, I've been racking my brain ever since he started doing that, and here's what I've come to. Many of the measures that are available to a president to deal with topics of international trade require the Congress to act, or at least the Congress to approve. It is usually something passed through major institutions like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to make sure that whatever it is you're proposing to do doesn't run you into conflict even inside your own country. International trade is a very complicated thing. It means, for example, that you're importing energy, which is crucial to every other part of the economy. So it might just seem, well, it's just oil and gas. Yeah, but oil and gas makes the car go, makes the truck go, heats your home, and all the rest. And so it ramifies into everything. Just to give you an idea, if you put a tariff on things, let's just begin an average day. If you're like most people, you get up and you have a cup of coffee and you put sugar in the coffee. Coffee is not made in the United States. It's an import. Sugar, most of it isn't made in the United States either. A tariff would immediately mean that the American company bringing in coffee, say from Colombia or Brazil or the places that coffee comes from, would have to pay a tax to Uncle Sam, because that's what a tariff is. It's a tax on anything imported. Okay, so the cost of a pound of coffee would no longer mean paying the coffee farmer in Colombia who makes the coffee, who grows the beans, and all of that. Because on top of that, you'd have to give Uncle Sam 25% if we were actually going to do the kind of things he's done with Canada and Mexico. And so we would all discover that our latte costs several dollars more tomorrow from what it did today. Same for the sugar. And, I could go on and on and on.
Mhm.
And one of the examples people enjoy is the avocado. Americans have become entranced with avocado toast and things like that. And that's going to cost, you're going to discover that breakfast is a $50 meal. It's a
Mhm.
different universe. And he didn't think that through and he didn't worry about it because the tariff, unlike many other things, is something the president has the power to do all by himself. Some years ago, Congress passed a law specifically giving the president that power. And it was at a time when no one was throwing tariffs around. So no one paid a whole lot of attention. I mean, some did because he was getting more power, and the president already has quite a bit. But so he can do it. And not only can he can do it by himself. So he can get all the attention, even from people like you and me who are on the media a lot. We will pay attention. And we can't say Congress passed the tariff because that's vague. He did. And so he got terribly excited. His understanding of economics is, I'm going to be very polite now, minimal. Because the first 10 times, I counted them. The first 10 times I encountered in his first term the comment about tariffs, he said, I quote, I'm going to hit China with these tariffs. China will have to pay. Oh, they'll hurt. It'll hurt. He didn't understand, or he did and was just being, dishonest. He didn't seem to get it that a tariff is a tax paid by Americans to the American government. That he didn't get. Only later, more recently, does he fudge it because someone took him aside and said, for all the people who remember what they learned in economics class if they went to college, this is, you flunk the exam if you say something like the president says, because it's elementary. The literature on tariffs is huge. Tariffs have been used in countries for hundreds of years all over the world. So there's a huge literature on what they are, how they work, how they fail, when they fail. All of that is well known. It's known to the advisors that Trump has. All of that flew out the window, and he's heaving them around because he can look like he's doing something. Oh, he stuck it to the Mexicans. He stuck it to the. Absolutely, he did because he can. So I'm afraid that's a long-winded answer to your question. He's he's taken with tariffs because they are a showman's dream. It keeps all the attention on him. It allows him to smite his enemies, if I can be biblical for a minute. He loves this image, and so that's what he does. But what he ignores is what the literature of tariffs, I've had to teach these courses. The literature of tariffs is full of this. What are the indirect costs? What are the unintended consequences? Here's what you have to watch. He didn't do any of it. He didn't do it. That's why it was canceled. It wasn't canceled because the Mexicans will put troops on their border or Canada will interrupt the fentanyl flow. That's just nonsense to make it look good. He's active. He's doing something. He made them give him something in return. I understand. It's campaign activity that didn't stop with the end of the campaign. He's forever showing how powerful he is. The reality, nothing. Nothing has changed at this point in the trade between the United States and Mexico, or that between Mexico, United States, and Canada. And by the way, just as a footnote, here's something that has changed. The United States signed an agreement. In fact, Trump, during his first presidency, signed the agreement that extended NAFTA, the free trade zone between Canada, Mexico, and the United States, into the future. He signed it. He just violated the treaty that he signed. The United States is showing the world, you sign a treaty with the United States, it counts for exactly nothing. Come a political need of someone like Trump or someone else, they can, and they're showing you they will, throw it out the window as if it didn't exist. And I looked across the landscape of American mass media. They were all talking about the tariff on Canada, tariff on Mexico. The number of those who said this is a direct violation of a treaty that the same man signed, it's his signature on that.
Mhm.
There were some, but there were very few. That disturbs the American notion. We abide, the evil oligarchs from somewhere else don't. Well, we don't. And that will affect people. I already can tell you of examples already in Canada of people making new decisions because they are now aware that they are working under the influence of one or another treaty signed with the United States. This one may not hurt them, especially if it's suspended, but who knows? You're letting people know there's an extra degree of risk associated. And the whole world is learning that lesson. Because if you put a tariff, then those people can't sell here because the price is no longer what they charge to produce the object. It becomes a much higher price because we have to pay this tax. And I won't even tell you what it's going to do inside the United States, where it's going to have its effect. For the last 100 years, the Republican Party has made its number one reputation as the political party that is against taxes. That's how it appeals to the mass of people. That's a basic part of its support. Mr. Trump is an enthusiastic advocate of a tax. A tariff is a Republican Party is a taxing party. And when it makes your latte go to double the normal price, you're going to understand. And the Democrats, unless they're very stupid, are going to see an opportunity here. Whoa, to say we will undo the tags that the Republicans put on, that role reversal of the same game. Here's the last thing. I'm going to use an example. 15 years ago, automobile companies around the world, American and foreign, undertook a competition. They could all see that the future of the automobile industry was the electric vehicle, to stop burning the fossil fuels and gasoline and move to electric. Everybody. Okay, here we are 15 years later. We thought that that competition had been won by the leader known as Tesla. No, the leader is a Chinese company most of you are watching this program never heard of, called the BYD Corporation. 3 letters: boy, yellow, dog, right? BYD has the best electric vehicles at the lowest price. Okay, let's assume you can get one of them for $30,000. But what would you actually have to pay if you're an American? Someone in Europe
Mhm.
can get it for $30,000. Someone in Asia, Africa, Latin, they can get it for 30,000. I know that because that's what they've been doing. If you go to Europe right now, you'll see them all over the road. We don't see any of them. Why? A tariff. An
Mhm.
initial tariff put on by Trump, about 25%, raised by Biden to 100%. So if you're an American company that wants to use a fleet of electric trucks, or you're a cab company that, in the interest of improving the air in the city where you are, you're going to switch from gas guzzling to electric vehicles, you can't buy the best quality for 30,000 from China BYD, because if it comes here, you're going to have to fork over 30,000 to go to China to pay for making the car, and another 30,000, 100%, goes to Uncle Sam
Mhm.
as a. So the cost to you will be $60,000. And now, if I can get this point across, every company around the world, whether it makes a shirt or a software program or lipstick or whatever, is competing with an American company that is doing that. They can buy the best vehicles for 30 grand. Their American competitor can't buy it because it would cost him $60,000. So he reverts to buying it from GM or Tesla, where he'll have to pay 50,000 for an inferior car because the tariff did not. You know what's going to happen? They're going to have trouble surviving competitively.
Mm-hmm.
And sooner or later, they'll put it all together, they'll connect the dots, and they will go screaming to Washington. My guess is they've already started saying, "What the hell," to Mr. Trump? "We voted for you. We gave you money. What are you doing? You're hurting us. We're going to lose business. We're going to lay off workers because the whole world is laughing as they buy BYD cars, and we sit here with our finger in our nose, unable to do it."
Yeah, it's fascinating to me as you're laying it out there. And I think you make a really good point, initially that Trump wants to feel like he's doing something, but then by doing something, not only is he harming the Republican Party that's supposed to be anti taxes, but he's also harming American businesses, which he is supposed to be in favor of. So it's like this endless loop here in which he's going, "Look what I did." And then what he did has very serious ramifications for the American people and American businesses. And, bringing China into this. So we have Trump targeting China with a 10% tariff on imports into the US that went into effect on Tuesday. And in response, China has announced retaliatory tariffs on US imports, including a 15% tax on certain types of coal and liquefied natural gas, and a 10% tariff on crude oil, cars, and agricultural machinery that will go into effect next week. And it kind of feels like we're back to where we were at the start of Trump's first term when he picked this tit for tat trade war with Beijing. But what's interesting to me is that we have 8 years of separation here. So over the last 8 years, the US has changed and China has changed. So where does that leave us as a world going into a potential second version of this trade war between the US and China?
Okay, it's a great question. It's a kind of big one. Let me give you a single statistic which I think captures the answer. Every year since 2016, when Trump has his first success, right, for his first term. So every year from 2016 to right now, 2024 just completed. In every one of those years, the economic growth experienced by China has been a multiple of the economic growth achieved by the United States. Let me just take the least favorable to what I've just said, the statistic for 2024. According to the International Monetary Fund, a Western, pro capitalist institution, if ever there was one, according to them, the economic growth of the United States in the year 2024 will be about, they're finishing up the statistic, 2.7, 2.8%. Over the exact same year, the 2024 year, the economic growth of the People's Republic of China will be 5%. Okay, I mean, we're done. If the goal, which is what it is, if the goal is to slow or to block or to inhibit China, not letting them get chips, hitting them with tariffs. Yesterday, that bizarre moment when we weren't going to accept postal packages delivered here, which is part of an international agreement we are a signatory of, so you can't do it. It's just, it doesn't work. We haven't changed their government. We haven't weakened Xi Jinping. It's delusional. It is a society now, we are a society that is cultivating delusional behavior, starting at the top. It's all make believe. It doesn't do what its rationale asserts it will achieve. It didn't do it in the 4 years that he was president. It didn't do it when Mr. Biden kept those tariffs against China in and raised them, as in my example of BYD. It didn't do that. That didn't solve the problem either. So, it used to be a definition of intelligence. You're intelligent if you understand that after something doesn't work many times, don't keep doing it in the expectation that it will, because it suggests that there's a screw loose here somewhere and it isn't working. I don't think he's going to solve the problems, neither of the United States nor of any else in the world, by this kind of herky jerky policy. I mean, he came to offer. Many would argue that he won the election against Kamala Harris. He won it more because of the inflation that we have just gone through, where everybody had that shock of, spending all that money for a box of cereal or a pound of sugar or all of that, the inflation, in short, and the tariffs will be immediately inflated. They will raise everybody's price, as in the example of the coffee at your latte. I mean, that's what these tariffs do. Now, there may be secondary effects that happen later in result. Yes, all kinds of things get, but the initial effect will be a worsening of inflation. You have to wonder about a president who wins an election being anti-inflation and promising to do something about, and then proposes this. And then when the Wall Street Journal, among others, really comes down on him for it, turns against him, which they did, he says, well, there may be a little pain in the program. I mean, really, you don't announce the pain after you do the thing.
Right.
If you're going to impose pain, you better prepare people. This really looks like two bros, Musk and Trump, just
Mhm.
acting out their uneducated prejudices because they're in charge. They can do it. We all pay attention. We all talk. The the effects of it. They have no idea. They have and nothing prepared them for this. Musk, who's busy making money, using his father's money to make money. Trump, who did the same with his father's money to make money. One in the real estate business, that's Trump. One in the automobile business, that's Musk. But that doesn't qualify you to manage the complexity of running a country. That's silly. And you might have been able to rely on the so-called deep state, the people who are, professional civil servants, and they work there for 30, 40 years, and they really learn a lot. But he's purging them, throwing them into a chaos in Washington. So he's not going to get any help from these people. They're running around trying to figure out how to hold on to their jobs or to leave to a better job. This is a recipe for one mess up after another.
Yeah, well, and speaking of that, kind of expanding on that as you were noting there, because as we saw on Tuesday, Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House, and that's where he declared that the U.S. was going to, quote, take over the Gaza Strip and force nearly 2 million Palestinians to take refuge in neighboring countries. So, forcing these people to leave, forcing other regional countries to take them in, while the U.S., quote unquote, cleans up the land. And then he even went as far as to say that they would not come back. Now, this comes after weeks of Trump talking about the US taking over Greenland and the Panama Canal and maybe even Canada at some point. And exactly as you were describing it there, it just sounds like he's just kind of saying whatever he wants here. But these statements have very real consequences. So, where does that leave the US economically? I mean, I know that the focus right now is on, oh, we can get access to natural resources here and there, but the US government is not even keeping up with the American people and what we need here at home, let alone adding on additional states in the Middle East and elsewhere.
Yeah, for me, it looks for all the world again like he's just so happy he's in the limelight. There is Mr. Netanyahu from Israel. There is he All the cameras are flashing. He's going to be on the evening news. He's the big I noticed Mr. Netanyahu was sitting there with a smile on his face because everything Israel did was in the hopes that the only country on earth that stands by them 100% is the United States. They have no other, they've lost it all. They used to have a few other, they don't have anything. And they've just totally wrecked their economy by going to war, because that's what they've done. They're a small country. People should remember, they have a population smaller than the city of New York. The total population of Israel, well, it depends how you count. Half of them are immigrant Jews, and the other half are the resident Arabic Palestinians. About 7 million of each. It's a 50-50 country. So the population of New York City is about 8 million. So there's 1 million more people in New York than are the total Jewish population that dominates in the country called Israel. Okay. Uh, so what you are doing is saying you're going to get the Palestinians out. How, pray tell, are you going to do that? They have just gone through, as everybody knows, a year, almost a year and a half of bombing and destruction that in most parts of the world, including the United Nations, has been called a genocide. Whatever your views on that point, the destruction is unquestioned. We can see it 100 times a day if we wanted to. They didn't leave. The Israelis told them to leave. They didn't leave. The bombing, the deaths, the maiming of their children in huge numbers, all of this has been documented. Didn't get them to leave. Well, how, Mr. Trump, exactly are you going to send troops? The Israelis send troops. We know the Israelis are well equipped because we equipped them. They have the same. I mean, where do you think they get the weapon from? They get it from here. They get the funding and they get the weapons, just like the war in Ukraine and so forth. So how are you going to do it? When they couldn't do it, are you going to bomb them even heavier? Is that what the president is going to do, having run his campaign on, quote, bringing an end to all these wars? He's not bringing an end. His proposal brings a beginning of a war, and a war which isn't going to work. We can't do more than the Israelis did. And we already part of, even our leaders said, you did too much. Take it easy, Israel, because the whole world now hates them as the latest perpetrators of a global horror show. So why are you getting involved here? And you're going to take it over? And then what? Other countries will take them? The Israelis have tried for 30 years to get other countries to take them. Not only do the Palestinians have no interest in going, but there is no country that has expressed the slightest interest in handling them. They would be now a desperately poor people. They've lost everything: their home, their furniture, their jewelry, you name it, they don't have it. So you would be taking what? A desperately poor, and I'm not even talking about the mental trauma these families have had to go through. Although you must think about it if you're not an inhuman kind of person. So here's the situation. It's an absurdity. It's something, I don't know, occurred to him the night before, and it would be something splashy that no one has ever said before. True. A wild idea. True. But now, as people think about what this means and what it would cost, you're right. For Americans, no matter what they think about the Middle East and the rights and wrongs of that horror show, they would have to see he's now proposing something that would cost a fortune to rebuild what has been destroyed, to move millions of people, to pay all the participants what would happen. Where's that? They're supposed to be saving money for the American people. He's spending like the proverbial sailor. It's just wow. And again, you come away, as with the Chinese packages and the tariffs on Canada, scratching your head. It's on again, it's off again. I wouldn't be surprised if within a few days of this conversation, you and I might have a talk on the phone and be telling each other about how and why he canceled it. That's all. He had a
Mhm.
wonderful telephone call with Mr. Xi Jinping, and we're agreed he's going to, and then he'll Xi Jinping, and they by now must understand who they're dealing with, gave him something that could make him look decent, and so he's happy. I got the Mexicans to put 10,000 troops on the boat. See, I got it. And the rest of the world that knows the story is laughing in its teeth.
Yeah, it's crazy to me to think that we're only a few weeks into his presidency, and yet I think it's a good reminder to all of us to keep in mind, okay, this is how it goes. Clearly you have a guy who campaigned really well on telling the American people what they wanted to hear. Now when he's in these places of doing the exact opposite, what are the American people going to do, and how are they going to respond? Because I think we could be in for a very interesting 4 years here. And I hope
Yes.
to continue to talk to you as we get through the months and see what else Trump has added onto the calendar for us here. But I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest here. Professor Richard Wolff, an American economist, founder of Democracy at Work, host of Economic Update, and author of Understanding Capitalism. Thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you also for having a program that honestly talks about these issues. It's the most important thing to do inside the United States that I can think of. So our hat, your audience, thanks you too.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of Sanction, the exclusive series for my paid subscribers. You can also find Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. As always, thank y'all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.